On this week's episode of Destination Linux, we're going to be covering community feedback, a new survey from Red Hat with some unexpected results, a video out there making waves about the top 10 reasons why Linux is better, and finally, our software pick and tips and tricks. That's all coming up now on Destination Linux. Welcome to episode 163 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast about sharing our passion for Linux and open source. Destination Linux is a show for all experience levels. So whether you're a beginner to Linux or a master sudoer, welcome. I'm Ryan, and with me today are the tribbles of Linux, Michael, Noah, and Gab. So we're thrilled to invite you back, Gab, from the popular Tech Pills YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber yet, you should be. Gab's channel focuses on technology, nice mix of hardware and software reviews, tons of information that you have over there. Plus, you're doing live community chats as well. So Gab has hung out with us back on episode 92, and it's so great to have you back for 163. So want to find out, Gab, what have you been up to in between episodes 92 and today? We need the full history. No, I'm kidding. What have you been up to lately?
Thanks, Ryan, and thank you all guys for having me here. So, what have I been up to? Do you really seriously want me to go from episode 92?
I mean, you could choose whatever you want to talk about. You could do the whole thing if you want, but you could just do whatever you want.
I don't want to take the whole show.
There's no requirement.
So, well, apart from like university finals at the end of January, I've been working on some Linux apps recently, and so I'm still working on my RSS reader called Feeds. If you want to check it out, it's on GitLab and GNOME GitLab. It's actually gfeeds.gabmus.org. So I'm mostly doing bug fixes there, and now I've also started working on a new app called What IP, and it's a simple app to get some network information like your local IP address as well as your public one, your open ports, and the devices on your LAN. It's just one of those like little utility apps that you would typically find like on the more popular platforms or your Android phones and all this sorts of stuff. So just something I felt like working on. The idea actually came from the wider GNOME community. So thanks to everyone that put these ideas together for me to pick up.
Very nice. So you're working on a lot of programs now. What's the RSS feed going to, what's it produce? What would it be used for?
Well, it's just an RSS reader. So you add your favorite news websites and you read news. And the highlights on that on the app are you have a reader mode so that you can just have a more consistent reading experience on whatever website you're visiting. It has JavaScript disabled by default to preserve some privacy and to, well, make the whole experience lighter. Because at the end of the day, just reading news, you don't need all the fancy whatever that today's websites have going on. And by the way, you can still enable it in the settings. And it also has a feature where you can save articles for offline read. So there's that.
Very cool.
It's a GTK app. So I think most of you guys, at least Noah and Michael, are still running Plasma. So
still and always.
Still and always. All right, that's fine.
I'm still alive, therefore I'm still running Plasma.
Of course you are. But I mean, there's also an option to disable client-side decorations if you want to make like...
the best thing about Plasma 5.18 has support for CSDs in the latest version, so they should work totally fine.
Sure, and I'm really grateful for that because I really love CSD. But some
somebody should, I guess.
Yeah, I like it.
I don't.
I think it's cool. Okay, that's the
Let's battle.
There is for... All right, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I think the option. The option is there for people like you apparently that don't like CSD. You can just go ahead and disable it, and you have the header bar that's now just a toolbar, and then your standard old title bar.
That's awesome. So, I like the fact that you're making it. You made an option to, if you don't want to use it, you actually have a choice. As in, most CSD applications don't give that option, so that's awesome.
To be fair, most known CSD applications, you can do it. It's more of a hack, really, because I didn't want to make a whole different toolbar just for disabling CSD. So I made the header bar not look like another bar.
Okay, I see what
Very
you mean.
nice. The geek talk is overwhelming me here, but it sounds like you have a really cool application that will work in both GTK and Qt with some setting options.
Of course, yeah. Well, it's an app I made to scratch my own itch because
There you
I want a simple RSS reader because I like to read news. And I couldn't find one that I liked on Linux, so I just made one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
Noah, what have you been up to?
I have done nothing terribly exciting this week. I've been
That's not true. You spilt your bubbly on your keyboard.
I spilled my
before
bubbly
the
on my
show.
keyboard, but for the most part, it was the well, actually, I guess that's not entirely true. So here's what I did. It was EDC hockey, so it's state hockey championships. Now I couldn't possibly care less about sports, but I'll tell you the thing I do care about is my boss at the radio station said, is there any way that we can stream hockey and make it look like a professional broadcast, but do it on a budget of $10,000 or less? And I went, yeah, with Linux, that's very doable. And so we actually set up 4 Linux boxes. 2 of them were out in the field that were bringing stream back, and then 2 of them were back at the station running Nginx and re-encoding that stream and then sending it out to our CDN that would then get embedded on all of our websites. And when they got the numbers back for the amount of people that were able to stream it, they were like, this is the blow up. We're blowing people out of the water. This is fantastic. And then the following week, or the following weekend, so it would have been this Saturday, a competing station had the contract to broadcast a championship game, and their stream, you had to restart it every 15 to 20 seconds. And so I kind of looked up and went, Linux for the win. And so, we spent less money and got a better end product. And yeah, we got a lot of people coming over to the booth and asking, how did you guys do this? And even the guy that was running the camera was like, man, I wish I knew how to use Linux, because it's crazy that you're able to buy this older hardware and still get this kind of performance. Because we were not using, one of the machines was very nice. It was a Dell XPS, but the other one was like an 8-year-old Dell Optiplex. And OBS just sips CPU space just a little bit at a time. And it makes it so that you can use very old hardware and still get fantastic performance.
What I like about that is you talked about this radio station before, and that they're primarily been focused on Windows and things. And instead of just sitting there reading from the gospel of Linux to them, you're taking action on things, finding solutions that meet their budgets, meet their requirements, and using Linux in that way. And by doing that, you're building interest by itself versus just saying, oh no, you guys need to get all these Windows things out of here. Have you heard about privacy and security and all of this? Like, you know, it'll fall on deaf ears for most people, but you're putting things in action that are saving them money.
And the truth is, and this is, I consider this a good thing. The truth is, like, they don't really care what operating system. I mean, the program director, he didn't even ask. He didn't ask, how is it running something different? He doesn't care. He just wants it to work. And so what he learned was, hey, we do this thing and this really works, and we do this other thing and that thing doesn't work as well. And so let's do this thing instead of that thing.
Very nice. So Michael, what's new in your world?
Well, I actually have a lot of things I've been working on. I did some development for the DLN website, the DL podcast website. And one of the things that I did was, how we have these spotlights and these tips and tricks and stuff. I made a page that keeps track of all of those so that you can go to the single page and then just, find out what we talked about in any episode since we started doing the picks, which was like episode 82, I think. And
that's been asked for a lot, by the way. So that's
a lot of people wanted that. So I finally got it. And so you can go to, it's destinationlinux.org/picks, and that's it. And you can see the page and it has a list of everything, and you can do a search through it there. And I also set up so that the data for the picks are in a simple data set that I put on GitHub repo. So if anybody wants to help contribute to keep it up to date in case I miss it every once in a while, so that's possible too. And we also are working on a new project with DLN. Can't really give you much information right now, but I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up that in the next couple of weeks or so, we're going to be launching something really big, and I am super excited about it. And I wish I could tell you more. And next week, I will be able to give you more. But just wanted to let you know that that's coming. So we're still expanding the network and making even more great stuff. So keep tuned in, I guess, whatever.
Keep tuned.
There we go.
Or whatever.
Yes, that's the new slogan for the network. Keep tuned in, or whatever. I like it. I'm keeping that. So, Ryan, what have you been up to?
So we had a really fun event yesterday that Michael and I decided on a phone call. We're talking about the network and some things we're launching that Michael just teased there. And I was like, hey, you know what we should do? We should have we should set up a YouTube time where we just chat with our patrons. We have our patrons all join in, and we chat with them about any Linux topics or things that they want. And it could be patrons of anybody involved in the network. So if you're a patron of Tux Digital, you're a patron of Destination Linux, you're a patron of Das Geek, doesn't matter. If you're a patron of one of the shows here, Linux for Everyone, then you can come join in and join the discussion. And this conversation ended at like midnight when we kicked off the idea. And then by noon, I was like, Michael, well, at midnight, I was like, Michael, we should just do it tomorrow, just to do it and get it done. And Michael's one of those people who likes to be prepared and take his time and really spend time making graphics. And
I like to have marketing and everything set up.
Let's just do it. And it turned out fine. It worked out fantastic. Actually.
Whoa. Let's be more clear about what it is, because you I am like that typically. But yes. We were in the conversation and I was like, I'm going to blow your mind right now.
That's true. Yeah.
And I said, yes, let's go ahead and do it. And I could feel his it was just a phone call, but I could feel that his jaw dropped right then.
Yeah. Because that's shocking. Usually Michael wants a 6-month runway to launch something. So we have the next one already lined up for March. It's going to be March 21st.
Yeah. 21st.
So if you are a patron of any of the shows that are part of Destination Linux Network, you can join into the Zoom chat. We have it on live for everybody else. So you can watch and chat in the comment section and things while we're live. But it was really fun to just talk with people about their experiences in Linux, what they're up to. I mean, I think at one point, Michael and someone were talking about weather. I quickly moved them away from the bingo club conversation back to Linux. But it's a fun time for everyone.
Wow, that did happen, but still. Yeah. You didn't have to tell people about that. They could watch it if they wanted to, but yeah, of course, put it in the show. Anyway.
I love it. So I think that was one of the fun things that we have this week.
Yeah, that was awesome.
This episode of Destination Linux and the entire Destination Linux network is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers the simplest and most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy, with an intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls, load balancers, and so much more. And if you're not somebody who speaks that geeky language, then just know this. You're going to log into DigitalOcean. It's going to have an absolutely beautiful interface that's going to make sense the second you log in. It's going to have pre-configured droplets that you can just click and have things like WordPress sites and things like that already set up for you. And this is one of the primary ways that I was able to quickly learn Linux and check out different things, test out different commands and servers that I wasn't going to keep, because you can build them, these droplets, and then you can just take them away just as fast if you want and build something else different there. It's just an absolute, it's amazing from a professional platform for people who want to use these services on an ongoing basis, but it's also great as a learning platform as well. You can get all of this plus access to the world-class customer support for as low as $5 per month, or you can use their flexible pricing structure for as low as 0.7 cents per hour. That is darn near free. DigitalOcean has over 2,000 cloud-agnostic tutorials. This is the learning part here. So it doesn't matter if you use DigitalOcean. You probably are still, if you've done anything in the cloud, using some of their tutorials, because that's how nice they are. They just give them to everybody out there to stay up to date with the latest open source software, languages, and frameworks. You can get started on DigitalOcean for 2 months free, and they're going to give you a $100 credit if you go to this website, do.co/DLN. You're going to type in do.co/DLN. It's going to give you 2 months free and $100 credits to play around with and learn. And we want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode and the entire Destination Linux network of shows.
This week in community feedback, Andrew writes in and says, "Hello, Destination Linux podcasters. I've been running Gentoo for a solid year on my laptop, and I've been listening to your excellent podcast since episode 140-something. In all the talk about open source, I do not recall ever hearing a discussion about where to look at the source code of the different programs and flavors of Linux. That's the whole point of open source, is it not? The ability to look at the source code and modify it if wanted, to inspect it and see how it works. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to future episodes of your most informative and engaging podcast. By the way, I feel that stools do not get the respect they deserve." Did Michael put that in?
I did not.
Also,
I did not. That's why it's so fantastic. I did not.
I love Andrew.
Okay, I'm just going to believe that. Also, what's the status of Wayland? Thanks, Andrew.
So, Gab, I feel like as somebody who develops software for Linux, you have some apps and things out there. This is perfect for you to answer.
Well, I have some opinions on it. And of course, Oh, so first of all, I want to thank Andrew for the email, and this is a very interesting question for sure. Nowadays, most of the open source stuff you can find out there is usually hosted on easy to use and access platforms like GitLab or GitHub or what have you. And browsing through these projects is actually very easy. And usually, to find the source code for whatever project you want to look at, you just use your favorite search engine. It will lead you to source code right away. But that's not virtually always the case. And in fact, many open source projects, particularly the older ones, including, I think, to an extent, the kernel, are hosted on platforms like Cgit. They are not as easy or intuitive to browse, or even just bare Git repositories without any web front end. So that's not something we are used to.
I thought GitHub was invented specifically because Linus Torvalds needed the
No, Git
needed a better
Git. He created Git, and GitHub was a company based on the idea of Git. But
I see.
Yeah.
So the kernel
like
isn't
the
actually
tool.
hosted on GitHub, huh?
No, it's
I don't think
hosted on the kernel.org website.
Oh,
Exactly.
Today I learned.
There
But
are
it's
mirrors
using
out there.
Git.
Yeah, it uses
It's
Git.
using Git. Git is like the underlying technology and the command line tool that you just use when you do Git clone. There are some tools built on top of Git, which are GitLab, GitHub, and so on and so forth, that are not relied to Git in any way other than they use it in the backend.
Yeah.
Huh.
But they actually introduce some new concepts that are actually very useful, like forks and pull requests are not native concepts of Git. Pull requests and forks, it's a lot easier, and you can actually contribute right from the browser by using the web editor, and that's very easy to do.
Has there been any discussion of moving like the Linux kernel and some of these other like very substantial projects over to something that's more universal like GitHub or GitLab?
To be fair, I don't know, but I don't think that's a problem because you can do mirrors, and there are lots of mirrors, particularly of the kernel. On I think the biggest mirror is on GitHub, but that's not actually needed because you can just every repository with Git is just when you say clone, it's the word couldn't be more perfect because it's actually a one-to-one copy of the repo. It doesn't matter where the original repo is from, but not all projects out there use these new web tools. And up until couple of years ago, I think even some big projects like GNOME weren't using any of these modern tools. In fact, they recently moved to GitLab because people wanted an easier way to contribute and to report bugs and to make pull requests, and also other features that are not really inherently related to Git, but that usually they go together very well, like continuous integration. And the GitLab platform that GNOME in particular is using offers those options too. So,
well, I mean, I see that Linus Torvalds has a GitHub page, and he has the kernel posted out there. So that may not be his official area, but maybe that Noah is showing some movement towards some of the bigger platforms there. I'm not sure.
Well, there's
I just posted
some
it
of the
in the
value
chat.
is the having a mirror just in case kind of thing. Like it
Right.
I don't think they actually use GitHub to facilitate all of it. They just have it there as well. Just like KDE and GNOME have stuff on. I don't know if GNOME does, but KDE has stuff on GitHub, even though they completely ignore the GitHub version. It's just a mirror copied over to GitHub. And I think that GNOME does the same thing. So like everything is really on GitLab, and they just kind of do a mirror onto GitHub.
But I think for your average person who's just out there saying, hey, I heard that this is open source, I'm supposed to be out there and go look at code of things like apps and stuff, for the most part, you're going to find it on GitLab and GitHub. But if you go to the project page, generally their web page, they'll have, I've seen it at the bottom, or they'll have special sections for it. But if you just look through the web page, generally they're going to have a part where they're going to list where they're storing their source code that you can go and take a look at. Now, keep in mind, it's going to be organized like programmer's code. So it's not like you're going to look at it and go, oh yeah, that's the Linux kernel. That makes sense. That's where it boots everything. It's not going to necessarily make sense to you, but you can go out there and play and certainly start learning different patterns and things of the code.
We haven't talked about source code typically because it's a very, it's kind of a jumbled answer because there's GitLab, there's GitHub, there's also these other like Git and all this other stuff that exist. So the best way we can say is like if there's a project you're interested in, just go to their website, and if it's an open source project, they will definitely have a link that somewhere to get the source code. And that's kind of like the unfortunate truth, in that there's really not a single place to go to get to figure out how to contribute. And I think in most projects should just put more, put some more effort into like letting people make it easier to find that stuff too.
And worst case scenario, if you're ever curious about source code and need something audited, you can send a request to Michael at destinationlinux.network, and he will go through and translate the source code into what we call pseudocode, which is basically human readable code. So you can ask him to translate the kernel, for example, and you'll get back, this is how the kernel boots, this is what happens during this time. He'll break all of that down for you and deliver that as a report.
What you'll actually get is just a sentence that says, hey, looks like the Linux kernel to me.
See, kind of a combination of both. It'll be essentially saying, hey, this is the Linux kernel, and here's some pseudocode. So
there you go. So the second part of his question I thought was interesting, especially for all the NVIDIA lovers out there. What's the status of Wayland? Gab, you want to take a shot at that one?
Well, sure. I mean, the status of Wayland is a weird question, because Wayland by itself, it doesn't do much. The weird thing about Wayland compared to Xorg is that, of course, we are used to Xorg, and the fact that it does most of the stuff we're used to in a modern desktop environment. But Wayland being just the protocol and little more than that, it's the job of the desktop environments, or to be more precise, of the compositors, to implement all the features we actually need in a desktop environment. At this point, Wayland, I think it's usable, particularly with GNOME. I don't know how usable it is with Plasma. I haven't tried, to be honest. And also with Zway, it's particularly usable in my experience. Zway, if you don't know, is a tiling window manager for Wayland that's inspired by i3. I've actually played around with it again after some time today in my computer. It just works pretty well. The only big things that we're missing right now in Wayland are screen recording and screen sharing, which are actually very much related to each other. We're working on that. I know that GNOME developers in particular are working on it. And in fact, just the other day, I read a blog from Georges Stavrakas. I hope I didn't butcher your name, about performance improvements for screencasting in GNOME Wayland using the newly released Pipewire 0.3. So again, they're working on it. They're ironing out like the last things and the remaining stuff that needs to be working on a typical.
Isn't NVIDIA a big holding point for this? Because anybody who has NVIDIA, as I understand, they're still pushing EGL streams.
Yeah. Okay. And about that, NVIDIA thinks that they can do whatever they want because they have a big name, and people will just bow their head and go ahead with whatever nonsense they're trying to push. But the reality is that Wayland is moving forward without NVIDIA, and NVIDIA users, unfortunately, are just being left behind because the standard is set by what Mesa is doing, and NVIDIA is just doing another thing.
Yeah, I've heard that NVIDIA is doing some work to try to make it functional in some way, but I believe you have to add some things into your boot. You remember when you have to go into like do the no mode set and things? I think you have to go in there and do like
I think you have to enable early kernel mod setting, which is
yes.
I don't really know what that means.
And then even then, I don't think it works particularly well, which leads to the question: what's the status of Wayland? To me, regardless of my love for what AMD and Intel are doing with the open source drivers and on the desktop and things along those lines, NVIDIA still has a big part of the market. I think it's going to hold Wayland back because of NVIDIA's decisions that they've made of not pushing Wayland unless they've changed recently. I haven't gone and done research to see if suddenly they've changed. I know they have gotten more into helping in some ways with open source. So maybe they're going to change their ways and that will push Wayland forward faster. But without that, I think I know Wayland's going to continue, but I think they're going to hold Wayland back from really mass adoption if they don't change their stance, or if they haven't to this point changed their stance on Wayland support. So I think it's one of those things where you're seeing it in distros, but most people are just logging into Xorg unless you're using something like Fedora, which defaults into Wayland in the GNOME session.
Okay, so to be fair, all of what you said, I completely agree with. But at the same time, I have a different point of view on that, because if you're doing something, you're doing your thing. Okay, the people that are behind Wayland, behind the behind Sway and the GNOME effort of moving to Wayland, you're just moving forward because you know that Xorg is a dead technology. At some point, it just needs to go away, and you have a standard that's set and a way that things should work. And so far, 2 companies out of 3 major companies that produce graphics cards are following the standard. So what you're going to do is you're just going to keep working on the thing you're doing. You cannot just start you're going to just stop working because NVIDIA doesn't want to follow the standard.
I would love to agree with you. I love your point there. And the problem is, though, I don't see that happening like Canonical or anybody else suddenly with all the work they do with NVIDIA saying, well, we're just going to ignore it. I think that they're going to wait for NVIDIA before they push Wayland. And Ubuntu's the biggest distro out there. And that's going to hold Wayland back if Ubuntu's going to wait.
Ubuntu's different, though. Ubuntu's different because they're putting in a lot of effort into, like, so a lot of people are thinking that Mirror has been killed or it's dead or whatever, or that they got rid of it or in some way. But Mirror has been completely converted into a compositor for Wayland. So its entire purpose is to be the thing that Wayland should have in the first place. I'm sorry, I think that Wayland is great in what they're trying to do, but I think it's very disappointing that they're going to replace this fundamentally important piece with something that's half done. It's a protocol. It doesn't have a compositor, and you still need a compositor to do basically everything on the desktop. And they have Weston, which is not really, like, it's not meant to be used.
It's the reference implementation.
Right. And I think that's a mistake, and that's what's holding Wayland back a lot. It's having all these different distributions or different desktop environments having to build their own compositing structure. So we have more fragmentation on something that's supposed to not be fragmented. And I just think that's a very bad idea.
But how does that fix the NVIDIA issue?
Because Ubuntu is making Mirror to be a compositor for any DE that wants to use it.
Are they still working on it?
Yes.
Isn't the UBports guys and the Mata guys working on it right now?
They work on it as well, but Mirror is still fundamentally built by Canonical and Ubuntu. UBports does do stuff with Mirror, but in a different kind of way. But they've switched it over into doing a Wayland compositor as their focus. And like, I know that some of the DEs, I can't really give you exact names because I don't remember which one, but at least 2 have said that they're going to be using Mirror to support Wayland in the future rather than building their own, which I think is a good
Mata
thing.
Is one of those. Yeah, I mean, what you said,
right.
I completely agree with what you're saying. Of course, it's a big task to write a compositor from scratch to support Wayland, and also considering that most desktop environments out there already have a window manager and compositor that usually also tied together. So it's a big effort, and the fact that the Mirror has evolved into being a universal compositor for Wayland is great, because it will remove lots of work from the hands of the Mate and XFC and LXQT developers.
I think people will wait on NVIDIA to push Wayland. And
yes, I agree with that too. I'm just saying,
at
like,
least
Ubuntu
the biggest
is putting more
distro
effort than
out
people
there
give them
will
credit
wait
for.
on NVIDIA to push Wayland before they push Wayland, based on their history with NVIDIA.
I think that we have to wait for all of the hardware to be supported. Like, as far as like Wayland shouldn't wait on NVIDIA to develop things, and I do agree with that they should be pushing forward as much as they can. But as far as like distros actually implementing it as a default, I think they have to wait on NVIDIA, because if we have people moving over to Linux from Windows or Mac, and then all of a sudden their system doesn't work, or specifically Windows because they have NVIDIA and their system doesn't work anymore, that's a problem. So we should actually have to wait.
Does Ubuntu still have the auto detection tool to switch you for?
Yeah, I think that's built into GDM, actually. I don't think it's just...
I thought that was a pretty cool workaround to get Wayland out there.
I think they made it for
people.
GDM, but yeah.
And then if you have NVIDIA and it detects it, it automatically switches you to Xorg just so you can stay compatible. But you see a lot of people have to work around NVIDIA, or had to work around NVIDIA to this point to get Wayland to take off. So the answer to the question, still waiting, I guess.
That entire thing was the answer to the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I
think
everybody
just listen to the whole thing again.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But it's still a thing where we're really in a wait period. And I think that Wayland is great, but we're still in a situation where we can't say that it's going to be... I don't think it's going to be anytime soon.
Well, good news. We'll make NVIDIA easier to install in the next distro release for sure, somehow.
So Ben writes in to say, I enjoyed the segment on the open ebook reader, and I thought it was worth mentioning that there's a fantastic bit of open source software, ebook reading software specifically, that you can sideload onto your Kobo or Kindle right now called KO Reader or Co-Reader, and you can just go to coreader.rocks. I've used this for a couple of years, and it's really fantastic. Has great front rendering for EPUBs, or font rendering, that's what it should have said, and it's really good for displaying PDFs, DJVU, files and in a readable fashion so that you can use them in an ebook reader, because a lot of people have complaints that PDFs and ebook readers are really bad, and he's saying this provides a good way of doing it. So this is really interesting, and I think that this is a really cool suggestion, because I didn't know this existed until now, and I
didn't either, and
Yeah.
I think this is great for people that already have those devices. We know this is a huge gift for birthdays and Christmas and everything else. People buy you an e-reader like, oh, I heard you read a book. Here's an e-reader from Amazon or whatnot. So you can kind of turn it into a open source reader here.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and then the fact that you can use PDFs as well is one of the things. I've actually had people send me messages saying that they tried to buy something from like Humble Bundle or whatever, and it was PDFs, and they were like the worst kind. They were like so disappointed that it was PDFs, and maybe this would help them be able to do it, and that's pretty cool.
We love hearing from our worldwide community. We have many ways for your voice to be heard. You can send a short email or video that may get incorporated into the show. Send all of those to comments@destinationlinux.org. Red Hat this week has discovered what us on Destination Linux have been telling you since episode 1, and that is that open source, this thing that we talk about from time to time, is taking off. A recent enterprise survey performed by Red Hat concluded that proprietary software use is on a decline. The survey was not just to open to Red Hat customers, but rather any Linux business that has 1% or greater of Linux use within their infrastructure. In the same survey, they found 95% of almost 1,000 enterprise IT leaders thought open source was strategically important to their organization's overall enterprise infrastructure and software strategy. Red Hat's 2019 survey found that 55% of respondents in software was still proprietary. This year, proprietary software fell to 42%. Now, here's the thing. I have spent a lot of time, not only in small business, trying to educate people in small business that this is the next strategy. But the truth is, if you look at larger business, if you go into eBay, IBM, Amazon, all of these companies are using open source software, and that is getting to be more pronounced. And the reason, primarily, it's a cost thing. They are interested in the least amount of vendor lock-in, the maximum amount of flexibility, the least amount of cost to get the software to get the job done. And what they're finding is open source ticks every single one of those boxes every single time. Now, we had the chance to sit down with Deutsche Bank and ask them about, hey, what do you think is going on with open source, and how does that help a company as large as Deutsche Bank succeed? And Tom Gilbert was kind enough to sit down and say, listen, here's the thing. It doesn't matter if you're running a company that has a top line revenue of a few $1,000s or a few $100 million. The reality is, if you want your business to succeed in today's day and age, we look at what open source will be able to bring to the table. We look at what our proprietary components and alternatives are able to bring to the table, and open source is coming out every single time. And that, again, is part of that vendor lock-in. But the other part of it is the actual code quality is much higher. And so it's worth more. It's worth investing more in that code. It's worth investing more in those projects and stuff, because you're not as worried about, can I get my data back out of that, right? And I watched that happen just a few months ago in a medical industry. They were importing some medical imaging into some medical imaging software, and the software that they used, and was not my recommendation, they just had it, was open source. And the discussion in the boardroom went something like this: hey, Noah, do you see any problems with us being able to get our data out? And before I could even answer, their chief technology officer said, hey, it doesn't matter if we can get the data out, because we can always hire a developer to just continue to continue to maintain the software that we're already using. And so in a lot of ways, it's somewhat irrelevant. Now, the truth was, in that particular scenario, the medical imaging that they were using, it was possible to get in and out of software. But whereas previously these companies were looking and saying, what is the best tool for the job? How much money is it going to set us back? And if that company goes under, what's our second best alternative? Now they're fully embracing the software, and they're saying, hey, we're in this for life. We're going to hang on to the software for life. If the software goes away, it's okay because the code is open, so we'll just maintain it ourselves. We would be okay doing that. Now, any large company will take that approach. Smaller companies are still, I think they're still fighting for that. I think a lot of the small companies are still buying the Office 365 subscriptions. I think a lot of the small companies are still buying the Skypes of the world because they say to themselves, this is the best product out there. This is what everybody else is using. This is what I should use. But if anything is true in the IT infrastructure, it's whatever starts at the top of these big name companies, whatever it is they're using, eventually trickle down. And so as operating system agnosticism is becoming more and more prolific and people are looking for things and saying, hey, I would love to run this particular software, but this competitor over here just runs in a web browser. That's way better. A lot of people are looking and saying, okay, well, I would rather have maximum freedom with my software and be able to run it on anything I want. If that's a Mac, if that's a Linux PC, if that's a Chromebook, if that's a Windows machine. And typically what fits the bill there is open source. And so, I would love to say that this survey surprises me or that I'm shocked by it or that I'm pleased to see the results of this. But the reality is, we have been watching this happen over a very long time to the point that one of the consultants that I pay to come in once a year to kind of give me some fresh ideas on Altispeed and what it is we can do differently he's been telling me for the last 3 years, stop worrying about pushing open source. You've won that battle. Like that battle is won. It's just going to take a while for the rest of the world to catch up. This just to me seems like this is more evidence of that open source. Right? Yeah, it is taken over. It's taken over the enterprise. It's taken over the IT industry. You're not going to sit in a room. There was a time where you would sit in a room, and I've been there. You sit in a room or you sit in a conference and you say, I use the open source alternative, and everybody, well, he's not the real guy. The real thing. I mean, if you had the budget, maybe you'd use the real thing.
Right.
We don't get any of that.
You must be
anymore.
broke. Right. That would be the thought. Right. Yeah.
None of that. Now, when you can sit in a meeting and say, have we looked at the open source alternative here? Is there an open source alternative? And every IT guy in the room goes, hey, I played with this in my home lab. Hey, I played with that. Hey, Joe played with this. I mean, these are things that you just can't do. And here's how you know this is working, because you look at the reaction from the proprietary alternatives, right? What has Microsoft done in the past 15 years? They have the MSDN program. You can go generate as many licenses as you want as long as you pay the $900 a year. You can generate as many Windows 10 licenses as you want and spin up a lab. Now, why do you think they did that? Because people are spinning up Ubuntu boxes in their basement and spinning up web servers, and IIS is just falling off the face of the map. And when Microsoft looks up and goes, why is that? Well, because all the 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, all of the people that are even Microsoft shops aren't testing on Microsoft software because they couldn't get access to it because they weren't going to pay for the license just to try it. And so Microsoft had to address that, and hence the MSDN program is born. It's just, I think it's too little too late. So I'm thrilled. I am thrilled to see this, but it doesn't surprise me.
What's interesting too is they said when you're talking about, and I know you're just giving an example, but it kind of ties back, Gab, about community-based open source software. They also saw in their survey that was rapidly growing as well. Not at the same level as the open source software that was backed by big companies, but certainly on an upward trajectory. So companies, to Noah's point, are not as afraid to say, hey, yes, this is supported by, 2 people or a small group. We're, before they would say, there's no way we're going to put anything of any relevance on it. Today, they're more open to that. And probably because they know worst case scenario, they have people on their teams that are doing open source, creating open source stuff, and they could just take it over or support it at least for a small amount of time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, part of the reason why I think small open source projects still have a place in big companies is what you said, that they can just hire someone to do the code. But the other half of the reason is that depending on the size of the company and depending on how critical that piece of software is, a big company can just decide to throw money at whoever's created that project and just say, okay, we'll pay your bills and you just keep doing your thing. And that's happened before.
Good point. Yep. And I think also on the survey that I found really interesting is they said in conclusion that a lot of their respondents simply said the open source software was better. So it wasn't an ideology of security or whatever. It was just this software is better. And I think that's pretty awesome.
It's nothing we didn't already know, as Noah said. We've been preaching about open source for how many years now? And the reason is that the model just works. As soon as the software you're making is free, as in freedom, or just even open source, it automatically gets better, because if it is of any relevance, of course, if it isn't, I don't know why someone would make it in the first place. Anyway, if the software is of any relevance, of course someone is going to notice it. And if there's this thing that's it's called the Linus law. Given enough eyeballs, all bags are shallow. So there's that. When a mainstream YouTube personality with over 10 million subs creates a Linux video, it's a pretty big deal. That's what happened this week when Linus Tech Tips, who usually focuses on Windows 10 and more mainstream hardware and gaming, decided to do a top 10 reasons to use Linux video. His 10 reasons included freedom, software management, performance, stability, spying, privacy, and transparency, customization, command line, portability, learning, and, of course, community. Linus did give a call out to NVIDIA's lack of open source drivers, as well as mentioning it can obviously be trusted as so many huge companies are using it, including Microsoft Azure. Then he made Ryan's day when he called i3WM out as an example of how flexible the desktop environment can be. While the Linux desktop hasn't yet produced the mass user growth we all think it deserves, having someone like Linus give another call out in a big way to Linux is definitely a big starting point. Though he did mention the trolls and the get off my lawn type that exist in the community, he correctly concluded that the vast majority are welcoming individuals who just want Linux to succeed and grow.
So I thought this was awesome advertisement for Linux. You know, Linus Tech Tips is one of the biggest tech channels out there, period. He has a huge draw. He has a massive audience. People definitely follow every word that he says. And for him to suddenly go in and start creating, this is his second Linux video, I believe. But
I think it's about 10 or something at this point.
Yeah,
He's done a couple in there.
Yeah,
this is the first one though I've seen, at least, that was directly, hey, you need to use Linux. I've seen some stuff of, hey, we're going to test out and use, but maybe they're out there. But this is the first one I've seen that was.
There was another one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they make a few, but it's mostly Linus is not in the video. It's mostly like Anthony's in it or something like that.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah, exactly.
But this, I think this is very. I don't think there's many that he's actually in, but it is. They've done quite a few, and it is good that they're doing this. But it's funny because the end of the video they say, like, the title's like why Linux is better. Here are 10 reasons why Linux is better. At the end of the video, he says, he's like looking off to the camera and he's like, you know, they're probably going to yell at me about saying that Linux is better, but I'm just saying, like, here's reasons why it's better. We also had a video like, here's a reason why this other one's better, like Mac is better and stuff. I was like, that's kind of interesting, the way they're approaching that.
He does have some of those videos out there as well of why I think it was Windows is better than Linux. He has a video or something along those lines. But I thought, you know, his approach here, and I know he has advisors and folks that utilize it, but some of the things he was calling out were very specific that generally people who've only been in Linux for a period of time start to understand, like NVIDIA's,
to be fair, he also
desktop open source drivers.
He went to Reddit and asked people to give us suggestions about what should be in the video. So that's mostly probably why.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
But there was a lot of stuff in here that was good, so I'm glad that they did that, because even if they're, because not everybody's gonna be an expert on it, and it does seem, and I think the Anthony guy is pretty, you know, in depth into the space of Linux as well. But there's
his way around it.
Yeah, so there's definitely, you know, I like the fact that they went to, you know, ask the community about, like, what are your top raw reasons, so that we could have like a full, you know, approach to this topic rather than just being something that we kind of like casually mention or whatever. So they put a lot of effort in, and it's obvious that they did. So I think that that's great that they did that, and as they gave the attention that Linux deserves on their channel. So I'm happy to see that, and I think that a lot of their reasoning was quite good. I think some of the stuff is good, and also some of it is like double-edged sword sort of stuff, like software management. It's like, we have a fantastic software management, provided that the software that you want uses it and is available. You know, that kind of thing.
I don't think it's a double-edged sword in the sense that in an ideal world, and that's the kind of mindset that package managers have been created with, is that everything is open source. So, of course, you have a package manager where packages are built from source. Of course, we don't live in a perfect world, nor an ideal one. So the model itself is, of course, flawed, but with stuff like Flatpak snaps and app images, right now, I think this issue is mostly solved, and we still have the benefits of a central way to manage software, be it Snap, Flatpak, be your package manager, even AUR is a way to include proprietary software or quote unquote unsupported software third party into your system.
That's true. It's just like the barrier entry is still there. But I do agree that the universal app formats.
Well, he showed
fantastic.
how annoying it is in Windows in the video to click on and go to all the different websites to get your software and
Sure.
individually download them and all of that. So I think he had some great insight here. He also using i3WM that we didn't talk about that in the beginner's distro desktop environment that we should give everybody. But I'm now changing my answer to i3WM is what everybody should be using, even as a beginner.
Of course, sure.
The flexibility of their desktop. So he had some good call outs here. It's a great video. I think if nothing else, what you can conclude from this is Linux is now hitting these mainstream media outlets in ways we haven't seen before. It's becoming way more popular. People are talking about it. The news is getting out, not just Linux in the enterprise, not just Linux in the cloud, but Linux as a desktop solution. And I believe at the end, if I recall, he talks about they're going to do a follow-up video on their gaming on Linux.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to kind of show, well, how has Linux progressed since the last time they looked at gaming?
I'm pretty sure they did the gaming video before Proton existed. So I'm really interested to see what they do with this one, because that changes a ton. But yeah, I think this video is great. That they put the effort in, and it's great that they went so far deep into the topics that they covered, and they gave examples of like what it's compared to Windows and like what's the negatives of Windows, the positives of Linux, and they did it in a way that it's presenting Linux as that's the solid the desktop system that it is. So I'm really happy about it, and I also like the fact that they put in the privacy and security aspects as being a very important focus, because that's one of the reasons I think that one of the most valuable benefits of Linux is that it's an operating system in the broad sense of way I'm saying it, but it's an operating system that cares about the users versus the other way of trying to use the users as their own value. And it's more of like you use the system, not the system uses you, that kind of thing. And
the user can get as much out of putting something into the operating system. They'll get back out. When I get other people into Linux, I can't count the number of times I've come back to them and then asked for something and said, "Hey, can you help me out with this problem? Because now you know that thing way better than I do." So you get out of it as much as you give in. Now, how many people can say that about Microsoft Windows?
Yeah, exactly. So it's. I mean, I'm glad that they made this, and I think it's pretty awesome that they did.
Still, I think that the message they're sending is kind of mixed, because in a way it's good that they're showing Linux and that they're giving it some screen time on their channel, which is, as you guys said, has lots of visibility. But at the same time, most of the content they're pushing is with Windows 10, and hopefully this will change. Maybe at some point they'll like the Linux content will reach in the amount of videos that they push, the quantity of videos that they do with Windows. I don't know. I think that there are many things that they can explore as far as content goes for the Linux platform, including how home theater PCs, Kodi boxes, home servers running, Jellyfin or Plex or whatever. There's actually lots of content that they can explore, and I just hope that there's going to be more.
Yeah, you hope it's not a one-off kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
because up to this point, they've been kind of one-off. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
That's true. They do, when they do them, they do them very sporadically, and I agree. But I think that I even though that they are doing them sporadically, I still think it's good that they're doing it, because they're still giving attention that might not otherwise be available. Like the fact that they have so many subscribers and so many views is good, that they're putting a spotlight on it, because those people might not have even heard of it before because they're just Windows fans or something like that. So, well, not fans. I don't know if there are Windows fans, but Windows users. Yeah. So, but anyway, I think it's good. But I do hope that they continue, and I hope they continue to put as much effort into this one, because it definitely shows, and I can't wait to see what the gaming one is. Our software spotlight this week is Grub Customizer. So Grub Customizer is a graphical interface to configure your Grub or Berg settings and menu entries. So what's really cool about it is that Grub was what you use to boot your system, and if you have multiple distributions installed, you basically use Grub to switch between the two, and it looks super out of date. Not out of date, but it looks super ancient in general. But the Grub Customizer allows you to modify it and customize a lot of it. So you can move and rename or remove menu entries and stuff like that. Because sometimes you update your system, you have different installs, and you see like older things that you don't even have anymore sometimes. So you can get rid of that. You can edit the contents of the entries and like rename them. You can you get support for both Grub and Berg. You can also customize it overall with like a different background images. You can change the text colors. You can do all kinds of stuff like that. And you can also apparently changing the installed operating system by running it on a stool. That's thanks for adding that into there.
Oh, my bad. A live CD. That was what it was.
Yeah. I knew you changed it, but I don't care anymore. The stool is awesome. I acknowledge it. It has its own glorious place. The stool has its own glorious place in the. So anyway.
So Grub Customizer is really great for new people as well, because they're probably doing dual boot systems. Maybe they decide they need to move one of the OSs that they've installed in Grub up. Doing that manually is not really user friendly. Grub Customizer is. You literally click on, hey, I want Windows to actually boot first because that's where I start my day because I have to use Windows for work. And you click on it and you click the up arrow till it's at the top. You click save and you're done, and you reboot your system. And next time you go into Grub, Windows is there at the top, or vice versa. I want Linux first, only rarely ever boot into Windows. You can move it down there. There's a lot of other things you can do for it, but it is new user friendly, I think, for the simple stuff that you could do with it.
If you need to do that kind of stuff, this is a very good option to do it. If you don't need to do it, don't bother. You just have one install. You don't need it.
Our tip and trick this week is cutting and pasting in the terminal. That's right. I mean, certainly you have used one of DigitalOcean's guides and gone to one of their platform agnostic guides and tried to do it on your own server, or maybe you have a DigitalOcean droplet spin up and your SSH'd in. You want to copy the guide right into the terminal so you don't have to type all those pesky commands. Well, there are a number of different tips and tricks that you can use to do that. So Control W, for example, will cut the word before the cursor, adding it to the clipboard. Control plus K will cut part of the line after the cursor, adding it to the clipboard. Control U will cut part of the line before the cursor, adding it to the clipboard. And Control Y will paste the last thing you cut from the clipboard. The Y stands for yank.
I thought Y stands for yeet.
Yeah, of course. It can't be yank because yeet is a thing now, so that has to be.
What is yeet? What are you all talking about? Is that like a competitor to wheat?
No.
What is yeet?
Okay.
Why are you interrupting Noah's perfect presentation?
Get off my lawn, is what basically you just said. Anyway, so I'm not going to go into the weird memes of stuff now, but you just look it up. It's a thing.
So there's
I see a lot of people just use Control C, Control V, for everything.
And then Control Shift.
Yeah,
and Control Shift C, Control Shift V if you're trying to go into a terminal emulator and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. These commands are actually really interesting because it's a clipboard that's locked to I don't know if it's locked, but it's specifically for the terminal. So it's like a clipboard in the terminal this is using rather than the main clipboard of your system. So if you use these like Control W, Control K, and Control U, it will make a copy that when you do the Control Yeet, it will put it in whatever you have previously used, but it won't take it from your main clipboard, which is really interesting. So it allows you to use your main clipboard at the same time as using the clipboard in this. So your terminal allows you to, if you want to use your main clipboard, you just do Control Shift V for pasting from the clipboard from the main one. And I actually use Control K and Control U all the time, not even for the pasting part, but it's just
especially if you're doing these long commands, if you're just doing sudo apt upgrade every day, whatever, maybe it's just easier just to type it every time.
Well,
if you want to cut some part of that out and make a change to it or whatnot, knowing these shortcut features are going to speed you up in the terminal tenfold.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a small extra tip, the apt upgrade thing. When you do apt update for running the update for the refresh of the packages and stuff, and then you want to do apt upgrade, if you just hit Control W, it removes the update, and you just type UPG tab, and bam, you've upgraded, and it's super fast. So
there you go.
Even unless you could also just do it all in one command if you want to put an alias or something. But we talked about that in a previous episode.
A big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. If you want a behind-the-scenes pass into the making of the show, and an opportunity to chat with us live, consider becoming a patron. Our patrons help keep this show going and get awesome perks like access to live recordings and unedited versions of the show. And like this week, you may have access to a patron-only chat live on YouTube as well that you could be a part of. And the best part, you can join for just a few dollars on Patreon or sponsors.
Destination Linux Network also has a great way for you to become a part of the community by going to destinationlinux.network and joining our forums. Discuss the shows, the network, with all of the listeners across the world, all in one place. If you're looking for live chat sessions, then you're welcome to join us on our interactive Telegram group, where we have more than 1,300 members of the community interacting with one another and sharing their passion for Linux. If you want to learn more, head over to destinationlinux.network.
And we love hearing from you, so please get back to us and provide some feedback to ask any burning questions or yell at Tech Pills for his opinions about Elementary OS, for instance. You can send all of those comments to comments@destinationlinux.org. Please try to keep the comments brief, as we may include them in a future episode of the show. Also, don't forget about the DLN store. Pick up some awesome swag from across the network of podcasts and shows. We have limited edition concert t-shirts out there, which have all of the shows that we launched the network with on them, represented on one hoodie, one t-shirt, one coffee cup. How awesome is that? So go and get your DLN t-shirt today. It is a life-changing experience, some say, allegedly.
Yes, some say allegedly often. And if you want more content, the fun doesn't stop here. We also have our own channels you can check out. You can go to, it's still this, really, people? So Ryan can be found on YouTube by going to fillmystool.com, where he'll fills your brains on hardware, software, and all things Linux. We got to change this next time, by the way. I'm going to do it, but still.
We're not changing it ever.
No, Michael can be found.
That's my company's name. Yeet My Tux My Stool.
He's adding more stuff. Yeet My Stool. Anyway, so you can find my content at tuxdigital.com, where I do an in-depth weekly Linux news podcast called This Week in Linux, and other Linux-related content. And you can find Noah at linuxstool.com, where he does the Ask Noah show, a weekly talk radio show at 6 p.m. Central on Tuesdays. You can join him, and he'll answer all your Linux and tech questions and stuff, and sometimes business questions if you have them. And Gab can be found...
I'll also take stool questions.
Yep, sure. And Gab can be found on TechStool's YouTube channel, where he holds live streams with community, and also you can find his latest videos there as well. And to be clear, it's Tech Pills, just so you know. It's
No stools included.
No stools right now. It could be in the future. You never know.
Well, feel free to send me one.
It's only $9. Why not?
Aren't they sponsoring you yet?
No, they don't sponsor. No, I haven't contacted them, and I
That's too
probably
bad.
should.
Yeah.
You definitely should. You're giving free advertisement there.
Well, I haven't necessarily talked about it. I just show it. I don't really talk about who made it.
But does anybody really want to use a stool because Michael does?
Stools are very fantastic. They actually give you. It's called active.
If a stool was in my office or in Noah's office, people would go out and buy them and be like, "Oh my gosh, Noah and Ryan uses one of those." But the fact that it's in your office makes it kind of an anti.
That's ridiculous. In fact, Noah gave us a story earlier. Unfortunately, it was not a part of this recording, but I might have a copy somewhere. But he mentioned how he was told that active sitting was a very good thing, and he learned that active sitting is used with a stool, and that is important. So if you want
Michael,
good ergonomics,
Michael,
Noah.
the point, the thing you're missing there is you have to sit on the stool. You can't put it in a corner.
Yeah,
it's only on the corner during the recordings because I have
really rude to stick that stool in the corner.
We've never seen you sit on that stool ever. In the entire history of Destination Linux, you'd not sit on the stool.
When you think about the negative aspects of consumerism, that stool is a representation of the worst parts of consumerism. You spend money given how much you paid for to begin with on something you're not even going to use.
That's right.
So everybody have a great week, and remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination. Thanks, everyone. We did it. I like the ending about how Michael just
get out of the way. Where's the stool?
It's out of the corner finally.
He's now using
the consumerism comment finally got to him. There we go. Look how comfy he looks now.
Yeah.
Nice. He looks
now,
so much
Michael,
comfier.
Now, the question inquiring minds all over the world would like to know, do you consider yourself standing or sitting?
I am active sitting. Exactly. It's called yeet.
Active sitting.
Noah. It's called yeet.
Yeet. Active sitting yeet.
Yes.